What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to talk about SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there based off their technicals, and talk about the overall market as we have some big data dropping very soon. I'm going to talk about why the market ended up dropping the way it did before getting a bounce, and what you should be watching for tomorrow, as I believe there's a good chance of the market bouncing once again. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I talk about what's going on with the markets, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon. It ends in just about 7 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So look at the heat map for the markets right now. We can see there's a lot of red across the board, from the Microsofts out there, from the tech sector to even the electronics and the tech sectors. Looking at consumer discretionaries and a couple of others, the same thing is just going on. Lots of red throughout the market, even retail trade. But looking at SPY particularly, we could see we had some very, very interesting price action today. So in my video from yesterday, I was talking about this trend that was developing. We had this ascending wedge. Once this loads, I'll show you. This ended up playing out, and which was kind of like very different from the way I was actually thinking it would play out. I was thinking that this could have happened like intraday or not, or we'd have to like watch and see where it broke first. But anyways, what I warned you guys about was if the market ended up, getting a breakout, it would happen in either direction. If SPY ended up breaking above this ascending wedge and we started pushing to the upside, the market could have just kept going. If we broke below it, we would likely see downside. And I was calling this out yesterday. Make sure you watch this carefully. Today, during the pre-market, you can see the pre-market started right here. The market gapped down very nicely, and we saw this big drop off this wedge. We actually came down to fill the gap down here. Very, very big drop. A huge drop came. Most of the dropping happened during the pre-market, and this was very, very huge. So this did technically play out, and now that this happened, I have some good news for the bulls. We actually developed a bullish divergence on this drop, and the market is trying to rebound, and we have this gap up here. If the market continues to break out and starts pushing even more, we could try to fill this gap as soon as tomorrow before CPI comes out. So I'm going to break down more details about the technicals in just a couple of minutes, but let's first talk about some data and things like that for the markets. So for Wednesday, there's not really anything coming out, just some like crude oil data, some like natural gas data and things like that. But remember, tomorrow is still going to be a somewhat significant day because of the fact that tomorrow is the last day before CPI. And this is going to be an opportunity to take profits or to just be very careful with positions, because we don't know what's going to happen on Thursday. On Thursday, before the market opens, okay, we have CPI coming out in the morning, and that's going to have a very, very big effect on the whole market. But before that happens, we have Wednesday, and tomorrow is going to be the last day for it, the last close before CPI ends up coming out before the market opens on Thursday. So it's going to be a very interesting day, and I do believe the odds favor upside. Now, we'll break that down in just a few minutes. For earnings, we had Rivian, AMC, and Upstart all coming out. I think most of them reported, but they're still in their earnings call, so we have to wait for that to finish before making any claims about them. So we're going to be watching these and looking at these a little bit later on. But for tomorrow, we have Roblox, Sony, and then Disney after the market closes. So that's going to be the biggest thing for tomorrow in terms of earnings. Disney's going to be a big one. It's going to be very telling for how the economy is doing, how consumers are spending, and other factors like that. And I think it's going to be very interesting to witness. Now, the reason why the market dropped in the morning, and I called this out and warned you guys about a drop coming, was because of this news right here. Moody cuts the rating of 10, actually it's supposed to be 11 US banks. That's still a bunch of them. And this is some bad news technically, because it's leading to some uncertainty about the current economic positions. Now, they mentioned that the high interest rate environment could be very negative for their assets, and many of these banks are in bad positions because depositors are just not putting in as much money. This is like taking away liquidity from banks, and on top of that, making things a little bit more difficult for them. They mentioned that for that reason, they have to slow down. They have to drop the credit ratings, and that's part of why the market just continued to drop. We also had this negative news involving China. It reported double-digit plunges in the July exports and imports data, which is quite negative too. That's why a lot of Chinese tickers came down pretty hard. But the question is, could the market rebound for tomorrow? And I think the answer is yes. I'm going to break down exactly why. Now, let me just call out one more thing. Tesla had an attempt to break out, but it ended up not really getting a major breakout. It came right back down to being tight. So right now Tesla's still very tight. This actually ended up kind of like extending. So we didn't really get a confirmed breakout on Tesla just yet. It came right back down, and we could actually redraw this now kind of like this. So if anything, it's very tight, but we're going to be expecting a big move anyways on Tesla. And my gut tells me, my prediction would be maybe more towards like the upside. Now, I can't promise that as it depends on news, but I'm going to break down exactly why that is, not just for Tesla, but many stocks out there. So, what's going on with SPY? Why am I calling upside for tomorrow being very, very probable? Well, when you look at the current technicals, we have a bullish divergence on SPY that developed basically right here. SPY made a lower low. The S&P 500 did the same thing. SPX, a lower low was made on the chart. You can see right here we hit this 445 level compared to the low right here at this 446. But the MACD was trending upwards. The RSI made a higher low, which formed this divergence. It's very, very simple. So then once this divergence formed, this is a bullish signal for the markets for a big reversal. The market started pumping to the upside, and the pump was quite nice today. We could look up like the 5 minute time frame, for example. We got a quite nice bounce with a nice inverse head and shoulders reversal pattern right here, and we started uptrending very nicely to fill these imbalances. I called this out intraday and warned you guys that there's likely going to be upside coming, a nice bounce attempt, especially if we broke our resistance levels. And we have this unfilled gap on SPY all the way up to about this 450 area, and I do believe we're going to see that very soon. My best prediction would be we might see a little downside in the pre-market, and the market's a little down in the after hours, maybe a retest of like 448, then a really nice bounce and another push for about at least 450 plus. I think we might fill this gap tomorrow thanks to the bullish divergence, and my prediction would be like 450.8 coming for tomorrow. The market had a nice uptrend, lots of decent volume came in, and I think the market may try to like pump approaching CPI, and I think there's a good chance of upside for tomorrow. I'm leaning more in that direction from a technical standpoint. Once again, technicals suggest this on the 4 hour time frame. We came just above the 200 EMA, and I think the market wants to bounce, and I think there's a good chance we're going to fill this gap and see 450 plus tomorrow. That's just what I'm predicting. In case I'm wrong and the bearish case plays out, if it breaks and holds below 448, it could reverse down to like 47.5 or etc. But I'm not leaning in that direction. Just to be clear, I'm leaning more bullish, but always be prepared just to be safe. For a confirmed breakout, we want to see it hold above 449. If it holds above that, that's going to be a good signal for the markets, and we should see 450 plus, and that's where I'm leaning towards for tomorrow once again. For Tesla, it's getting very, very tight right now. I showed you guys in the other charts, but Tesla also has this unfilled gap around this 251 area. I think there's a good chance this is going to break out, get a nice pop in the morning, drop a little bit, and then maybe try to make its way up to about 255. I think I'm leaning more in that direction. Now, if it breaks down hypothetically, the bears are going to argue that there's 247, 245 should be tested. Sure, those are the bearish cases. But looking at the 4 hour time frame, we're about to get a bullish cross on the MACD. It's like curling right here. And Tesla started to form a bullish divergence right about here, making an attempt to balance, but it failed to get that, trading very flat. So with the bullish divergence developing and the very, very sideways price action with this like wedge forming on Tesla, I would say the odds favor this thing getting a breakout in either direction, most likely the upside, most likely pushing for at least 252.5 plus, if not 255. And I think there's a good chance of a bounce. That's the direction I'm leaning in. For another stock like Aapl also formed. Let's just see if we formed some kind of divergence. We didn't really form a divergence on Aapl, but what I can say is that we were quite over sold on Aapl. We came down very, very hard. We're about to get a bullish cross on the PPO. And the last time we got this is when Aapl started pumping a little bit. So I do think Apple's due for a bounce. It dropped very, very hard in a very short period of time. So I think we're going to be seeing this thing testing 180 tomorrow, maybe breaking it and making its way up to this imbalance. We could see 182 or so right before CPI. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, even if the market bounces, guys, don't forget CPI is going to cause a big move for Thursday, but I'm just talking about Wednesday for now. On the QQQ, we got a bounce off our 200 EMA, very close to this 269 area. We bounced off this 369 area. Sorry about that. 368.82 is where we saw this thing bounce off of. And now we have this unfilled gap as well around this 375 area. Now, as far as the RSI goes, notice how the price made a lower low, right? The chart made a lower low. The MACD made a higher low. RSI made a higher low. This suggests a bounce should be coming very soon. So I think we might see some upside and a gap fill on the triple Q, and we might see this thing approach at least I would say 374, but possibly 375 plus if we manage to continue to break above it. And we have the 20 EMA around 373.98. I think it's going to test that. I'm leaning more in the direction of upside. For support, watch 370 and 368 as our supports just in case the opposite happens. But I'm leaning more in the direction of upside, just to be honest with everyone. Now, for Nvidia, the problem with Nvidia was the fact that it has a distributive structure developing on it on the 4-hour time frame, not looking that strong depending on the news and etc. But the market bouncing could help Nvidia get a bounce as well. It still is possible. I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. And looking at the way this thing moved, I think we had an unfilled gap up here. We do have these imbalances. And I think if I just close the extended hours, you might see it a little bit better. So I think on the 5-minute time frame, it's going to look a little better. I'm not really seeing it without the extended hours, but what I will note is that we have this imbalance here, which NVIDIA did not reach. And we do have this unfilled gap right here around this like 453 plus area. So despite the distributive structure that is developed on this chart, there is a possibility of NVIDIA getting a temporary bounce, and I could see it trying to hold and get a push for this gap fill right here. Part of the reason why I say that is because just like the market, when you look at the current structure and the current trend on it, this chart has been developing a bullish divergence right here, and it got a small bounce today. It wasn't that strong, but it is trying. There's a good chance NVIDIA is going to try to make its way up to about 450 plus. I'm leaning a little bit more in that direction as it's very tight right now. I think it's very probable. And if you look at bigger time frames like the 4-hour, the 30-minute time frame, even though it's not looking that strong, I could see this thing maybe gap down in the morning and try pushing. I could see 450 plus. I think it's very probable. And it may make an attempt to bounce with the market. I think the market could help this thing make its way up. So 450, then 456 are possibilities. I'm leaning a little bit more bullish. But just to be safe, don't forget to watch 440. If it does break below that, then we have like 436, 433 as our supports, depending on the news. But my gut tells me it's looking a little bit more bullish, and we might see it make an attempt to break out thanks to the market. For AMD, this thing, it didn't really form any kind of divergence. It's looking a little weak as well. But we're going to be watching 112 as support and within 109. And then for resistance, watch 114, 115, 1, and then this gap all the way up to like 116. So just like the market, I think there's a good chance that we might see an attempt by AMD to bounce. We might try to see it make its way up to about 115 plus, but we have to watch to see if it can get the break first before anything like that happens. And I think there's a chance of that breakouts to come. For Netflix, it just traded kind of sideways right here. It's kind of range bound so far between 440 and about 430 for the most part, going back and forth and back and forth. There are some instances where it drops below that, but I believe that for tomorrow, Netflix may be retesting about 440 and make its way up to about 445. I think it's going to see a little bit of upside, but I don't think it's going to be that crazy. Finally, for the VIX, I just wanted to call out something. On the VIX, I noticed that it technically has this gap way down here in this like 14 area. It started to come down today a little bit. The 4-hour is starting to cross a little bit. On the 2-hour, it's already like getting this bearish cross. The 30 minutes as well. The 30 minutes is not as significant, but it basically came up, and came right back down. So we're going to be watching. Does the VIX continue to break down? It might actually get a retest of about this like 200 EMA down to like 15 flats, and potentially even 14.5 are possibilities for another imbalance fill. If it continues to break down, I mean, if the VIX comes down hard as the market bounces, we have this unfilled gap around this like almost 14 level, maybe a little bit below that. So there is a possibility of the VIX like gapping down and just like coming down like this. If the VIX continues to downtrend like this, as the trend's looking a little bit more bearish for like the shorter time frames, this could be bullish for the stock market. The dollar did something similar, got a nice pump before coming right back down, and now it's starting to downtrend a little bit on the 4-hour time frame. It looks like this basically. 4 hours not looking as strong, so I could see it retesting like 102.3, maybe trading flat from there. That could be a bearish signal. Coinbase got a really nice bounce. We were talking about this yesterday, a retest of like 84 before bouncing, and we actually got the bounce. Nice inverse head and shoulder structure. It also bounced off the previous resistance, which became support. I could see this thing going for 90 tomorrow. I think it's very possible, leaning more in that direction. But if it comes down, 84 is going to be major support. But in my opinion, I think 90 to 91 are very, very possible targets for a Coinbase. For Google, and don't forget Alibaba has earnings for Thursday. Let me just talk about Alibaba just real quick. Okay, so for Alibaba, unfilled gap up here might get a bounce tomorrow. Going to be looking for it to get above 90, 95. If it breaks 95, I'm going to be watching for a push to about 96.5, and that could be more bullish. Anyways, for Google, going back to Google, this is holding up quite nicely. Very, very nice trend. Uh, it came down to retest 130 before getting a nice bounce. And we're going to be watching this gap all the way up here. Could we see this thing push up for 133? That's one real possibility. Got a very, very nice move. If it breaks 132, watch for 133. If it breaks down, watch 130.69 as support. My gut tells me there could be a little bit more upside for it as the 10-year treasury yield is dropping. This tends to be another bullish signal for the markets if the 10-year treasury yield ends up continuing. For now, we're just going to be watching it very, very carefully and see how it moves. I think my screen just froze. I'm sorry about that. But anyways, for now, we're just going to be watching these charts very, very carefully just to see how things are going. And let me just remind everyone that for now, when it comes to the way the market moves, you have to be really careful, very, very careful when it comes to the fluctuations, because the market is all over the place. One day the market is pumping, the next day it's like cooling off a bit. So sometimes things like this happen, and when they do happen, it is what it is. But I just want to mention that for the 10-year, it has a gap above and a gap below. It has a bearish cross on the 4-hour PPO, so the odds do favor downside for it, which could be bullish for the markets. For Amazon, we're going to be watching this trend right here. We can get a retest of like 138 before it tries to bounce, but it has this unfilled gap around 142. So I think maybe it drops a little bit to like 138.5 gaps down, then tries to bounce, and then we start pushing on Amazon for about 142. I'm leaning more in that direction. On Meta, looking at Meta, the current trend on it, let me just mention that it's holding up quite decently so far. You could argue that there is a possible inverse head and shoulder structure. You could technically argue that, but we need to see this thing try to get a hold above 314. If it manages to do so, I'm going to be watching for another pop and a retest of about 316. A break above that, there's 318 and 320. I think it's looking a little bit more bullish. If anything, it's trying to form like an inverse head and shoulders. I know someone in the comments mentioned that. I really thank you for that. But I just want to mention that, it's looking quite decent, holding up quite nicely. As long as it holds support, we could see this thing rebound for at least 316 plus and potentially even like 318. It has a nice structure, but like I said before, we have to watch this very, very carefully. On the 30 minutes time frame, you could also argue there's another inverse head and shoulder structure. Not an inverse head and shoulders, maybe more like a cup and handle. This could be bullish technically, so I'm going to be looking for a pop to at least 316 tomorrow. I think that's very possible. But just to be safe, we're going to be watching these levels and just see how it moves. But until I see you guys again, please have a great day. The market to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright, and peace out.